all of these sources. There's biofuels, there's nuclear. We could also talk about coal. Because you can take coal and, of course, generate electric power, which is what we do here. But you can also take coal and you can take it and make various types of synthetic fuels out of it. You can make diesel fuel out of it. You can make synthetic gasoline out of it. You can make synthetic jet fuels out of it. And we have a lot of coal. Okay? What's the biggest problem with coal, though? Pardon? Well, emissions, yes, because it's very heavy carbon content. Pardon? Well, there's a fair amount of it, but it's not. It's, you know, the more we use it for gasoline, you know, the quicker we're going to use it up, basically. But we do have these as various options. Now let's talk about the biofuel one, because we live in Nebraska. Nebraska is the second largest producer of ethanol. If we were to take and power all of those cars, remember how much gasoline I said oil we use in a year? If we were to try to replace all those cars so they run on ethanol, how much of that demand do you think, if we planted all of our available cropland, all of it, in corn and made ethanol out of it, how much of that 20 million barrels do you think we would produce, replace? All our cropland.
A lot.
10%. We would only, if all of our crop, we just stopped eating and we turned it all to corn and we took and made it into ethanol, we'd still only meet 10% of our ethanol, our fuel needs from ethanol, as it's currently made. So we got to find other ways to do that. What are some other ways we can do that? Anybody have any suggestions? Pardon? Well, no, remember I said that's not going to work, because you can plant all the corn you want and we still aren't going to have enough fuel. So what we have to find is, actually, if we're going to do biofuels, we've got to find a more efficient way to do that. Now I'm going to give you two really cool ways that we may end up doing that. Yes, ma'am? Ah, bingo, right on. Give her a gold star. Algae. Now the funny thing, if you've been around, any kind of ponds, right? You see this scum in the summertime begin to build up on these ponds. It turns out that these little pond algae really like producing a lipid in them that can be used if you take it and properly refine it and extract it. You can actually use that as a diesel fuel. It's amazing. And the productivity staggers. If you take like an acre, and this is off the top of my head here, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but if you were to take an acre of ground, and you were to plant that acre of ground, and you would produce just ethanol from that acre of corn, right? You'd probably get something like maybe 300 gallons of ethanol? Something like that, from that acre of ground. If you were to take this same acre of ground, and this were a pond with algae growing on it, this would go to somewhere around, and the numbers vary, but I'm going to give you this one. Okay? That's supposed to be a 1. You would go to 100,000 gallons of fuel. Now, which is the more productive use of ground? Now, let me give you another real head shaker. When we talk about fuel, this one blew my mind away. If you were to take that same acre of ground and you would put solar panels on, the big silicon solar panels, and you just have solar panels on this, on that acre of ground, okay? And you were to take the same acre of ground, you'd use it to make ethanol, or you'd use it to make biodiesel fuel with it. How far do you think you could drive from the fuel produced on this acre of ground? Well, for the ethanol, it was something like you'd drive maybe 30,000 miles on ethanol. For diesel from soybean, that type of thing, you'd probably go maybe 40,000 miles, somewhere like that. If you had an electric car, this is over a season, over a year, right? You had the electric car being charged, here's the battery pack, okay? Being charged by the solar energy off of this thing. How far in a year do you think that electric car would drive?
1,000.
How far? 1,000 miles? In a year, remember. $3.5 million miles. Same acre of ground. So when we start thinking about what's the transportation of the future going to be, I can tell you that it's not going to be powered by gasoline as we know it. Now, it could be some form of synthetic gasoline from coal, it could be from natural gas, it could be from our little green algae. The cars are not going to look probably anywhere now what there'll probably be some similarity and resemblances, but underneath they're going to be radically different than what they are today. My wife's car looks like a conventional Prius. You're all familiar with the Prius running around. It looks like a Prius. It's got a secret. Because back in the back of that thing is a great big wampum battery pack that weighs about 300 pounds. And we plug her car in every night. And when the weather's warm and she doesn't have to run the engine to keep the cabin warm, which you can just drive without having to turn the cabin ventilation system on, she can drive to work and back. And the Prius display was designed to max out, when it says miles per gallon, designed to max out at 99.9 miles per gallon. She will come home most nights with the display maxed out. And when I put the computer on it, she has driven many times the equivalent of 130 to 160 miles per gallon. Why? Because her car is a plug-in hybrid. There's only 3 that I know of in the state, and we have one of them. So we got that. The truck that I came down in here in, I decided that I was going to take and experiment with, see what ethanol would do, right? E85 ethanol, because you can drive most stations around, you can get E10, that's pretty easily available around here. There are 7 stations in Omaha area that sell E85, which is 85% ethanol, made from good old Nebraska corn, and 15% gasoline. So I went down and I went to Metro, and they were very generous to allow me to have some of their time and their shop space. And we converted my 4.3 liter Vortec GMC engine in my Chevy S10, we converted it to run on E85 ethanol. So all my driving now is in fact on E85 ethanol. So I've taken the amount of fuel that I use, where I was driving a car that had 10% ethanol and 90% gasoline, I've now reversed it. It's 15% gasoline, 85% ethanol. And it works pretty good, actually. It has some cold starting issues, but it hasn't failed to start yet. Okay? Pardon? I converted it January like 15th. So it's been in the winter, coldest part of the winter, and it works. Okay? So the cars are going to look different. How you and I get around is going to be different. The whole car sharing thing here is probably going to gain greater credence. There are a lot of people who frankly don't even need, if you live in a city that's planned properly, you actually don't even need to have a car. If anybody been to Portland, Oregon?